Good morning, my name is Sam, and welcome to our video this morning. Now today we're going to be talking about the subject of brooches, and you may ask, well, what about brooches? Why these little, just jeweled items? Well, there's actually like a real deep history about them, and it kind of stemmed from my thought process. It stemmed from the idea of the suffragette brooches is for women's history, since this month is Women's History Month. But I'm going to go through kind of all of the history of brooches, just briefly, not every single brooch in the world, because there are a lot, surprisingly. But we don't see them in today's time, or at least in the way you think. So I want to start off with these kind of brooches while my hot glue gun is warming up, because today's craft does require a hot glue gun, and if you're going to be replicating this and you're using a hot glue gun, always be careful and have a parent around. Now these are Celtic or Viking brooches, and these are not what you really would think about for brooches, but this was back from 3000 BC to 12,000 BC, so a way long time ago, and they would pin this long part into their cloaks and put this over it and hold their cloaks together.
Like a button?
Like a button.
Oh.
And they would just be kind of pinning them through, but they would call them more brooches than buttons. And I thought these ones are really cool, but these obviously aren't in style, nor are cloaks. But maybe if you find these just like cool enough, we can start like this whole thing, this whole fashion movement to bring cloaks and brooches back.
I would wear a cloak.
We would all probably wear cloaks if we could. That's the next fashion trend, everyone. We're going to have cloaks now. If you see people wearing cloaks, you'll go, Sam came up with that idea. Yep. And then so it was just a very functional use. There wasn't anything special to them. They did have very cool Celtic designs, like this one on the bottom, where it was just more design and kind of unique. And I would assume just they would kind of design them based on which part of the Vikings they were, just kind of to signify who they are, and maybe their status and things like that, because in history, you had to have a status, or else,
because they didn't have pirate ships for the flag, so they had the brooch.
They had brooches.
Yeah.
And so our next one, sadly they're called mourning brooches, so they would be worn. I had to draw on this one, I'll explain why in a minute. They're obviously kind of worn to mourn someone, but it was more of in a positive light to commemorate the memories of that one person, and then it was to be sad about it. These were back in the 18th century, and that means the 1700s, and so I kind of put just kind of the whole rig out they would wear. They would probably wear cloaks, so again, we're having that cloak kind of trend with the brooches, so I think they kind of go hand in hand.
But not the hat.
Not the hat. No. Hats are out of style, cloaks are in style, right. And so are brooches. So they would have these kind of string of pearls to kind of represent just like tears and, being sad about the losses of someone. And where I drew those lines, in the original picture, it was actually the person's hair braided into the brooch, and then there's a piece of glass on top of it. So you kind of kept that memory through hair. No, not everyone had hair in it. Some had pictures, some had paintings, items that just kind of reminded them of that person. You could have put like a pressed flower. If you wanted to do something similar today, maybe you want to remember someone and their favorite animal was an owl. You can always wear an owl brooch. Just something sweet like that. Now these ones, this one up top is a sweetheart brooch. So right before the World War, sailors would give these to their lovers. Their sweethearts. It's just kind of remind them as they would go off to war. And there was a lot of different designs, but this main one with the kind of eagle wings and crown was the main one that I saw, and just kind of repeated itself. And there's not much else other than they would just give it to their sweetheart. Now this last one is where the idea came from. These are the suffragette brooches, and you might have seen in Mary Poppins, the mom, she wears green, white, and purple.
Yeah, that's right.
And she kind of had some similar things, and it kind of came in both like high-end jewelry or just kind of ribbons and metal. And so both classes, I guess, of women and would represent these. And there's actually a significance to having green, white, and purple. I'm gonna look at my oh, excuse me, it's not purple, it's violet, for the reason that it says, give women the vote. So, GWV, give women the vote, green, white, and violet. And so that's what those colors mean. And so if you had seen someone in the 1920s with those colors, whether it was on their brooch, their outfits, I believe they had also kind of hats. There's kind of a whole fashion trend. Unfortunately, not dealing with cloaks. I think if they had cloaks, they would have made it top tier. But they would wear these colors just to signify that they thought, you should give women the vote. And so that's kind of where this comes from today. I personally have these brooches here. They're both chickens. This one a patron actually gave to me when I first started at the library a couple of years ago, and now I have a second one to kind of match. And you may be thinking, well, I don't wear brooches. I don't like those things. They're just big and bejeweled. But if you think about it, your enamel pins with your favorite bands, your favorite little cartoon icons, just enamel pins you wear in general. And I didn't bring any of mine today, but I have a collection of enamel pins. Kind of would be the equivalent of today's brooches. Is just kind of signify what you like, or maybe you wear brooch because your friend likes this one thing, not brooch, excuse me, a pin, and just kind of all these same things. Maybe you can give your sweetheart matching pins. That'd be kind of sweet. But if you don't have any enamel pins yourself, or you like the idea of wearing brooches and maybe cloaks, I don't know, we're going to go ahead and make our own. So that's what today's craft is, along with the history of brooches. Now, I've already made a couple. I've made myself a shamrock one, and these are just all made out of felt, and I have jewels and buttons as well. You may not have jewels at home, but buttons. And this is just a 4-leaf clover that I folded and cut it to make in the shape of a clover, and on the back of it I glued 2 safety pins to it, just so it has some nice strength to it when I pin it on, and won't just be flailing all around like that. And that's just kind of the general idea that we're going to do for all of these. I did forget my safety pins, and it's in the other room, but I will just kind of show you how to glue them together and what you should do and where you should kind of glue the pin, because you don't want to glue it directly on your brooch, because then you won't be able to move it around on your shirt and it'll be kind of protruding and sticking out. So I kind of did the same thing with this one. It has a similar kind of aesthetic or vibe to this chicken one, and when you look up brooches, they all are mostly jeweled or shiny in one way or another. So I made a pair of lips because not only do I like makeup, but it kind of represents femininity, and just it's Women's History Month, kind of goes along the same theme. And it's just something sweet, and you'll probably see me change all of these every now and then. I'll try wearing brooches and cloaks more often. And here I'm going to make an eye. Now, I don't have green eyes. I just thought this button was very pretty. But I cut these out in the shape that I wanted, and as you can see on the back of this white one, I just traced it with Sharpie. But always make sure to flip it so you don't see those Sharpie marks. And I do have a hot glue gun. If you have maybe fabric glue and you're not comfortable with hot glue gun, it's much safer that way. Obviously, Elmer's glue won't stick to it very well. And you don't need a lot of hot glue. If this bothers you where the edges are going to be out, you can glue closer to the edges. Just watch your fingers. Or you can have a parent help you as well. Picked it up now. I'm just going to press it down on there, tear away those little spider webs of glue. And then I'll just put a button on it. And you can make these out of anything. I've made them out of felt because it's a supply we have a lot of here at the library. Or you can make them out of spare fabric. You can make it out of old t-shirt. I wouldn't recommend paper just because if it were to get wet, then that would damage the brooch and or pin. If you have air dry clay at home, I've seen where they've made it with that, but however, you cannot take the safety pins and use them as backing because they won't hold to them since it's much heavier. It'd be a pin backing much more like this chicken here.
You can get something like that at Hobby Lobby, can't you?
And you can. Just safety pins are more accessible. You can get them at the dollar store. They're just $4, and they come in various sizes. So if you want a smaller one, you can have smaller. your safety pins and just things like that. Now, like I said, I did forget my safety pin, but I'll show you what I did here. So you see there's kind of a line of glue to kind of guide the safety pin, but I can still move this back and forth. And what keeps this safety pin secured is I glued this piece of felt over it very close to where I want the pin to stay. And that way I can't really move it up or down or left to right from what you're looking at. And it will be able to just safely pin onto my shirt, or hopefully a cloak. If I do get a cloak, I will show you guys, because I'm obviously excited about these. Not only my brooches, but the cloaks. So that's just what we have for today, where we made brooches for Women's History Month, and I've made one for next week. Don't forget to wear green next Wednesday, because I know going to school and getting pinched is not a fun thing to do. And don't be one of the people to go pinching people that don't wear green. I know you're supposed to, but it hurts.
It's not nice.
It's not nice. I do have a couple of books just to talk about women's history. I do kind of have a display at the back of our YA section of a bunch of books. Nonfiction and fiction. If they're fiction, they're just more women's main characters, like a strong character you think of. This is Heroes in the World War II. We have Dreaming of Code, which this one looks really interesting. I cannot say I've read it, though. But if you just need a general overall one from women's history, we have the Who's Who of Women in the 20th Century. And I think this one would be actually really interesting to go through and just pick out some women to research. Well, thank you for joining us this week. I hope you have a great Women's History Month. I hope you get a cloak and a brooch. If you have your own brooch or even a cloak, please send us a picture and tag us here on Facebook at the Denton Public Library, or if you're on Instagram, the Denton Library. Excuse me. All right. Thank you, guys. I'll see you next week.